Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with knowledge partners NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the show today. This is going to be a little different. We're outside our normal confines of the NASDAQ microsite in Times Square, and we're doing a remote here at the Dean Institute on Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee. And every once in a while, we like to get out of New York and get a chance to get out and visit some new guests, and certainly that's the case today. We're going to be talking today about creating and sustaining a performance culture. And who better for me to talk to on that than our guest today, Greg Sandfort, who's the CEO of Tractor Supply Company and is also a director with WD-40. Greg, welcome.
Thank you, TK. Glad to be here.
So, first of all, if anybody follows Tractor Supply, they know that your performance in the last 10 years has been amazing. So we're going to try and just dig down a little bit and tap that. But before we do that, we always have a question when we have a sitting CEO or a sitting CFO that also sits on somebody else's board. So my question for you is going to be, with you having that experience of serving on someone else's board, how has that made you a better CEO in your own company?
Well, first of all, I look at it now at a different perspective. I'm not the CEO, I'm a board member. And I have to think about governance, I have to think about the strategy of the company and so on in a different way. Particularly with WD-40, it's an international company. And that's what was so intriguing for me when I was asked to consider them. But it is a different perspective. I can feel the emotion and the concerns of the CEO, but at the same time, I know I'm a board member, so I'm looking at it with a more critical eye, toward the things that maybe I would say as a board member, along with my the partners there in the board, is the business running in the right direction? Are we making the right decisions? Are we acting fast enough, and so on and so forth? Understanding again that the CEO position is one that I sit in myself, so maybe I'm a little more compassionate in some ways, but I'm still a board member, and I'm expecting, to get the answers I need and the results that the company and the shareholders expect.
Well, you're right. You walk a fine line, but you were elected by the shareholders, and it does give an appreciation when you go back to your own shop of what people on the other side of the table are thinking.
Absolutely. You see the difference in how that board chair operates, how that board works as a collective group, how they make decisions, how they discuss issues and challenges, which every company goes through. And it gives me different perspectives. There are things I've learned from the WD-40 board that I've brought back to Tractor, as well as there's things at Tractor Supply that we do that I've brought to the WD-40 board. So I think it's been a good mix for me and for the company.
So let's talk about culture, and I know that is very, very deep rooted into the values of Tractor Supply. I've had the pleasure of following several CEOs in the process. I've seen the succession not only from senior management perspective, but also from the board, and it is almost seamless. There's a lot for us to learn about how Tractor Supply does that. I personally think there's a great tie between performance and culture, and certainly it's paid dividends for you guys. But when you take a step back and look now, after you've seen, again, here's another CEO that's had great periods of success moving the company forward. What are the keys to the company, but more importantly, the board, in contributing to building a positive team and performance culture?
Well, I'll pull up the old mission and values card, which is what we actually live and breathe by. This is really the basis, it's the foundation of how we operate our company. And each board member also is part of this mission and values. They believe it, they practice it. So for us, it starts with that foundational piece. Now, I think our success is based off of a number of things. Clear transparency with the board on what's happening within the company, and a good two-way conversation between not just myself, but the management team with the board and vice versa. I give the board complete access to anyone in management, actually anyone in the company, for conversation. And I think that's another cultural difference between us and maybe some other companies. I'm just as accessible as they are. And although I would say that our success, we have a very a driven culture behind continuous improvement. That's not the single most probably direct driver of the business. It's really cultural. And it's how we think about our customers, how we think about our team members, how the interaction with our board and our management group and the company itself is all kind of one. It really is unique. I haven't seen it in any other company. But it's special and something that started well back in the history of the company. When Joe Scarlett really was kind of the leader of this, and he was the one that developed a lot of the leadership principles and fundamentals we operate on today.
Well, it certainly has worked in that regard. And when you see the employees right down to the people in your stores, it seems like they understand here are the values of which
Yes.
I have to make decisions.
That's very true.
And as a board, that would give me a tremendous amount of comfort if you could go into a company and know that the decision making is similar all the way down through the ranks.
We do empower our store people, our team members, our store managers to make decisions in the best benefit and for the right of the customer while they're out in the field. That is unique. But again, it falls back to the whole mission and values, being the most dependable supplier of the products that this customer group needs, and then working through those values and letting people take the responsibilities, let them make the right decisions. We know that on occasion, someone's not going to make a decision that's going to be popular, or a customer may have an issue, but we resolve it as quickly as we can at the level of the store because of the empowerment that we give our people.
Just talk just a second. I think it would be very helpful to a lot of people in our audience on how it went from Joe to Jim Wright to yourself. Talk about when you came in and how Jim started to pass that knowledge and all that down, because I think that, again, if you look, that has been the key to.
It was, and I would say that when I first joined the company, there was no preconceived notion that I would ever be CEO. I came as the chief merchant, eventually assumed marketing and then the rest of supply chain. And it was skill sets that I had that I could bring. But over time, I think the board, Jim, and others saw that, maybe this guy's got a little bit more than we thought. And so he expanded my responsibilities. And Jim really started to work with me and groom me. And I had some outside interventions in a few universities. I had a personal coach for a period of time. Jim was a terrific mentor. And I would say that the way we handled the whole process, the company, there was no surprise, not only to those in the company, but also even to the street and to our investors. Everyone knew that who is this Greg Sandfort and how is this transition, and they could see this occurring over a period of several years. So I think the key to this was to start early enough. Once you've identified the succession plan and you believe you have the right individual, the board supporting it. And that, by the way, I spent a lot of time with each of the board members as well. Getting to know them better, them getting to know me. How do I think? How do I operate? Because I really believe that, a board puts, themselves at risk if they put a CEO into place that they're not really comfortable with. It's like really getting to know someone down to their soul almost. And I found that our board members and I have a very, very, it's a close relationship from the standpoint of I know them, I know what their expectations are, but yeah, I know still they're the board. And my job is to make sure I operate in the way that they believed I would, and that I would carry on the mission and values of the company and then transition that at some point to someone else.
If you had to provide a takeaway that's maybe different than the culture that we talked about and how valuable that is to board members or CEOs out there on how to make a good company great, which we're all striving to do, what would you offer our audience in the way of key takeaways?
Well, number one, I think you have to stay humble. You have to understand that, no matter how successful you could be, you could always do better. And humility is an important aspect of being, I think, a good leader. Secondly, it's about people. Maybe even more important than anything else. Get the right people in the right jobs. Challenge them. Keep them focused on the task at hand. Have a strategy that they can follow. And then I'd say the listening skills. You cannot be a great leader and do anything at a senior management level if you can't listen. You're never going to hear everything that you need to hear, that's for sure. But if you're open enough and you're willing to take the criticisms and the input, you can not only learn a lot, but you can be a much more effective person. And I think listening is something that many people underestimate.
I'm smiling because I can't tell you how long it took me to learn that skill set, okay? And my wife might argue that I have not learned it yet, but it really took me a long time to understand how listening was even more important than speaking or leading, because I needed to understand everything around me before I started talking. So I think that's wonderful advice, and it's been all good, great advice, Greg. I'm really appreciative that we got to Nashville and that you had an opportunity to be our guest here at Lipscomb University. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardroom. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again. We'll be doing another show from Nashville, so we'll look forward to seeing you then, and thanks for joining us.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.